when looking at a shocking passage, what can we learn from it? And how does it apply even to our day-to-day life? Let's look at it because this is very interesting. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians 14 where Paul says women should be silent in church. I'll read it to you. Stay for after, please. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 34, women should remain silent in the churches. They're not allowed to speak, but must be in submission as the law says. Verse 35, if they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. Oof, okay. The way we look at this verse is actually by reading more. That is my first response to this. Because if you just read this verse taken out of context, you can do all sorts of shenanigans with it. I think I haven't yet seen a church really following that to the letter of the law, because most churches then say, well, you know what, we don't let women preach in our church. And that's all good and fine, but here it says they should be silent. So why are you letting them speak in the kids program? And if that's a problem, like, where does it stop? Should women in women's groups, if that's also part of the church, should they also just be silent? Okay. And that brings us to the question, what is it about? So let's just expand what type of speaking is it meant. Just those two verses. Well, it's about inquiry, about questions they had. Apparently those women had questions. Let's zoom out to the full chapter. The full chapter is about order in the service. Apparently they had a problem with people dressing in a weird way, chapter 11, with abusing or misusing the gift of the Spirit. Same chapter, and chapter 12, about not actually showing the fruit of the Spirit, like not being, not being loving, while actually wanting to be very spiritual, chapter 13. Then also like the services were not intelligibly understood by people from the outside because they were so hyper spiritual with speaking in tongues in the wild and prophecies in the wild. So Paul actually uses things to say like, at most 3 should be prophesying, verse 25. And 1 should speak one at a time, and 1 must interpret. And if there's no interpretation, like he's ordering this whole service. Apparently there was a lot of chaos. And I've forgotten even to mention there was chaos in the Lord's table. So chaos is all over. Paul is organizing and ordering things. And what is he ordering? Well, the questioning of the women. Now we have to zoom back even a little bit more, because in chapter 11, he talks about how women should talk. So if he meant in chapter 14 they should not talk, why is he just 3 chapters before actually talking about how women should talk? He says when they talk, they should actually cover their heads and dress modestly, as back in that time was a way to signify modesty. So praying and prophesying to me are speaking. And Paul apparently just meant questions. And now we have to zoom back to the whole 1 Corinthians. What was the society back then? And then we understand that women, first of all, were not able to learn reading, in that there were maybe 2% of women that actually could read a little bit. They were not attending the Torah classes if they were Jewish. They were at average 15 years younger than their husbands. So just honestly in a very weak position to know things. And now suddenly they're back in the church, they're received by the family of God. And suddenly they're confronted with all of this teaching. And so it's very easy to understand that they actually had a lot of questions. Now, let's look at this passage again. It says, when they want to inquire, hey, well, ask your husband. He has been in Torah school. He knows things, and he might be able to explain it to you. Now, women learning in that society was out of this world. It was never thought of that women could actually learn. You virtually never hear about famous women philosophers. Maybe there were 1 or 2, as opposed to multiple men. Women did not have that position. Now, where did that women should be able to learn heart come from? And here is where we have to zoom back yet one more time to the heart of Jesus. Jesus was teaching women. He is teaching explicitly Mary, because Mary in that scene where Mary and Martha are talking together, where Martha is unhappy about Mary not helping at home, she's criticizing that Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. That's terminology for student to later on be a teacher. And that is important because later on, Paul, the only time in the New Testament you hear this phrase again, sitting at the feet of, is where Paul was sitting at the feet of Gamaliel. He was studying to become a teacher like Rabbi Gamaliel. So Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus. And who does Jesus employ to tell the message to the church that Jesus is risen? Well, it's the same Mary that was sitting at the feet of Jesus. And that's how we need to look at those verses. So here's actually a tip on how to read the Bible. When you come across something where you feel like hitting your toe, read it again, then expand the text, read a little bit more of context, read it even more in context, and read it more in context until the picture actually makes sense. And now if you look in the full context, it's actually about liberating women into being able to learn and to study the Bible so that they later will be messengers like Mary, who was sitting at the feet of Jesus. All right, go and read some more. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful week.